My dad went in, he went in October of 42. He spent 16 weeks in Florida, and then he spent 4 weeks at Burbank, California, gunnery school, and then he spent 6 weeks in Las Vegas at gunnery school. And he was trained as a flight engineer. And he ended up being a prisoner of war. I'll get back here a little bit. A prisoner of war in Loop 4, which is in northern Poland. Three days after his arrival, he met Brenda Evans near the Labour in Vain pub in Stone, England. Now that was an administrative area. The guys of you who were in R&R, sometimes my uncle, my godfather over in England, hauled you on the train up to Stone for the R&R. And I think that's why Dad was there, was to get assigned to a particular bomb group. She got off her shift at the Schweinerton ammunition factory. When I was little, my mother had nightmares, a lot of nightmares, vicious nightmares. Part of them were because of what happened at that ammunition factory when she was 16 years old. And part of them were Stuka bombers, back bombers. She'd have the most vicious nightmares. And of course, my dad at XPOW was busy trying to calm her down, and he needed a little attention. So it was an interesting childhood I had as far as World War II is concerned. Now Stone is on the upper left there. That's where Stone, England is. And Bolton's on the bottom right, just a few miles north of Bedford. And just north of Stone on the left there is Stoke-on-Trent. That's where my mother was from. That's where I was born. And they somehow managed to get together along the way in Bolton Airfield. That's what it looked like in those days. I've been there a couple years ago and it's different. Now, this is just a mission I pulled out of the files. It was one of Dad's missions, his 29th mission actually, on the 28th of April going down to France. They dropped 310 tons of bombs that day, but actually it was his bachelor's party. That was his bachelor's party that day. Some of you may have heard of this guy or know him, Limey Roundhill. He's a friend of Dad's. It was April, Mother was pregnant with me and they couldn't get approval of the Army to get married. So Limey went with Dad and they stole the papers. And Limey said, you know, if we put a general's name on there, that nobody will ever question it. So that's what they did. Mom and Dad get married on the 29th of April of 44. That's right across from it's in Stoke, England, which is one of the hamlets inside Stoke-on-Trent, and it's right across from the Spode factory, where the Spode factory is today. And the second day of his honeymoon, he got that other trip. He got to go to Reims, France. And so that was his honeymoon. They got one day off after they were married, and then away they went. He went flying again. So on the 29th of April, on the 13th of May, and this is a picture from the 13th of May of 379th Bomb Group, forming up over Bolton at approximately 900 hours. 54 years later to the hour, I found myself on a 747 circling East Anglia, waiting to land at Amsterdam, when I realized that I was in the same airspace 54 years to the hour of the day when my father got shot down. The run they had that day was supposed to go to Poznan. It was got diverted to Stettin, which wasn't as far. Dad said, I don't know how anybody ever made it back because of fuel. And they did fly over Kiel. He said it was a tough go over Kiel. And of course, he didn't have to worry about coming back that day. So So it was fogging in over Poston, so they went to Stettin, and they had some military stuff there they were bombing. But what interested me was it went over Denmark, going and coming back. It's just north of Kiel they got some, I guess. This is the actual mission report, and I got too many things in my hands here, but I'll try to, it's hard to see it. This is the main jutland of Denmark. This is the island of Fuen, and this is Copenhagen and the other island. And they were to go right back across the south end of that. I've got these on 6-minute segments, so if I shut it off too soon, I'd have to wait a minute. Well, a couple of things happened. First of all, it happened 75 German fighter planes come after them. One of the reasons 75 German fighter planes come after them right at that spot was because look how close they were to Peenemünde. That's one of the reasons there were so many fighter planes. Dad never made it to this target. At 14:32, they got hit. He was on his 34th mission. The 109 took out the nose cone of the #1 engine. And hot oil and stuff was coming out of there. They thought he was on fire, but there never was a fire. And for the next, they dropped their bombs. And for the next 12 minutes, they did something that the pilot got nervous. I'll just leave it go at that. And I got to be critical inside the airplane. And he tried keeping up with everybody else and burned another motor out right away. So then they turned around. Eventually they got going again. And at 16:35 they crashed. Right where that star is. And I was kind of surprised when I got the mission reports that they were flying over the south end of the island of Fuen. Anyway, F-Y-N, Fuen. That's where he crashed. It's a little town called Vildringa, north of Odense. Here is almost the Army, the military report. This has been corrected by me and a couple other guys. But anyway, the 20mm gun to the cone, and they ran out. By the time they actually landed, belly landed, they were down to one motor. And that's where they ended up. And they were building an airfield right there. The Germans were. They were just beginning to do it. And in the process, none of the stuff that's there today was there then. They were building it then. But they slid to a stop, and the Germans had them right on the spot. Now that day, 2 weeks after they were married, my mother and my grandmother would always listen to BBC, because BBC always broadcast the code names of all the planes that didn't return. And one of those code names was Brenda. Keep in mind they're English, so they believe in this stuff. My grandmother and mother looked at one another and said, "Dave's been shot down." And they believed it. That night my mother had a dream. She stood at a church at the front door, and all night long caskets went by into the church. And every casket was open. And she looked in every one. And by morning she had not seen Dad. She got up and she said to my grandmother, "Yeah, he's been shot down, but he's going to be all right." Just think about that. He's going to be all right. She believed it. They didn't find out for another 2.5 months or so that he was even alive. Now it's by a ham radio operator. That's his plane. One of the, you saw in that first picture, you saw a bearded gentleman. His name is Ben. I'm going to tell you more about that later. But anyhow.
Battery? Oh!
Obvious. That's okay, I can.
We can talk about it?
I can see it.
Battery.
Yeah. All right. Okay, I'll have to go up here.
It's on a little bit.
Uh,
I said it's not much.
Okay. The guy you saw in that first picture with the beard, his name's Ben Hendrickson. I'll tell you more about Ben in a minute. Ben Hendrickson knew a guy who walked up to the plane after it stopped skidding. And my friends in Denmark, I'm going to leave you some important information today for you guys, especially anybody that flew over Denmark. They know so much, including the guy that had I forgot to tell you about Soren, my buddy with the web page. That crash site was on his web page. And he has a web page, it's called Air War over Denmark. And it has every plane that crashed in Denmark, and who was on it, what happened to them. Every one. When I went with Soren over there to see the crash site, he was speaking with Ben, who was a historian, and Soren said, well, what was that guy doing walking up to the airplane, because he did not have a clearance to be there. Now that's research. That is research. I was so impressed with those guys. This German guy here, here we go. I'm doing this right. Oh wait, I'm going to tell you about that. Gotta go. Okay. The German guy you saw in that last picture was a young German that was assigned to Odense, south of there. And every Allied plane that crashed, it was his responsibility to go out and check it, see if it had any top secret radar equipment on it or anything. The guy turned out to be a helper to the Danish partisans. And he was married to a Danish gal in 1942, and he was a great help to the partisans in Denmark in 1943 when they started fighting back. August of 43 was a big time for him. So anyway, that German guy came out, checked the plane out, and the Germans over there said that the crew thought they were in Sweden. And so the day my dad died, he was very unhappy about that pilot. Why? Because he was put in a different squadron that day. He, the co-pilot, and the radio operator. Dad was a replacement guy, the co-pilot was a replacement guy, and the radio operator had flown over with the crew. But he had gotten hurt, he needed to make up one or two. His crew went back. And then, of course, he got to stay in the hotel for an extra year, you know. But anyhow, Dad said, I thought I saw Sweden. He said, I thought we were going to Sweden. He said, I thought that's where he was going. And he was very upset about that. Very, very upset. Now, anyway, so I found Soren. I said to Soren, I said, yeah, you know, maybe I should come over and see where that place is. He said, well, if you do, I'll show you exactly where it was. And that's how all this came about. I said, I'll see you next year on the 13th of May, which was 2012. So that's where I was. On the first day, we went up to Hans home there in the north, the 11th. The 12th of May, we went to Ringkøbing and to Vandal. And on the 13th, we were at Belringen. And here's what we saw. Up at Hansholden, they had the big guns. Those are 15-inch guns. There were 4 on the south side of the water from south of Norway and 4 on the Norwegian side. Soren said they only shot one once to see if it would work, otherwise they never were shot. That was an interesting place. Very, very interesting place. This is the pivot those guns set on, so they could move 360 degrees. Can you imagine how heavy they were? Inside that bottom layer of that circle was a railroad track, a little tiny railroad track, about 2 feet wide. And that railroad track carried the shells for that thing, which were about 1 yard long. And people had their, right behind that first tier, there was all the bunker ropes and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, that's kind of what it looked like out there on the point to the right. That's how big it is. See the radar? Right to the left, there was some radar towers there. A lot of radar stuff up there watching for bombers coming. There's the guns again. Those areas the Germans took over were many square miles. They took over several villages. They took over all kinds of stuff. And I'll tell you without hesitation that when you're up there in that part of the country, you'd stand on a bunker, a German bunker, and you'd see at least 2 more. And that went on forever and ever and ever. Germans had bunkers every place. Now, they had ancient mounds there. The ancient people in Denmark built those mounds. It's real flat up there. Now, ancient mounds in the area. Now, who can tell me which direction we're looking on that top picture? Soren was born in that area. He said to me, he said, David, the only people that can live here are those that are born here. The wind comes out the North Sea constantly, and those trees are always bent like that, except when they're having a real bad wind, and then they're bent more than that. Everything up there is at a slant like that. So they're looking south. Really interesting countryside. Here's the Ringkoping Museum we went to on the 12th. I'm going to let it go one more here. There's some of the stuff they had in that museum. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about why that's important, and I don't have a picture of it. In 2005, you may remember on the news that Black Sea had a big, or the North Sea had a big storm, and it uncovered a German bunker down by the edge of the sea. In that bunker was everything. Nobody had ever gotten in there and vandalized it because it was covered by sand the whole time. So my buddy Ben, that was on that picture, went up there with some other people, and they got the stuff out of that, and they brought it in and put it in this museum, and for some reason I didn't have a picture of that actual stuff, but it was all there. It was all there, and it was all, you know, pretty rusty and nasty and everything, but the key was, there was a half of a German's shaving kit with his name on it. So they found it. Found this German. He was a kid at the time. He was like 17 or 18 years old in the bunker. And he had the other half of his shaving kit, his brush or something at home with his name on it. And they were able to put it all together and talk to him. And so they have a video of this guy, who was the last guy in that bunker before the sea covered it up. And all that stuff's in there. Now what's amazing, this is a reconstructed bunker there. On the right, you'll see the fresh air machine with the crank on it. This was a kind of a command bunker room. And it has a telephone and a lot of other things. Now you can't see it real well, but that little stove there has a door on it, just like a bank vault. It's got 2 panels to crank shut. So having spent 38 months in Germany while I was in the army myself, I know Germans make stuff like that, big and heavy, and you know, but what was that like that for? It was because it was grenade proof. So if they were in the bunker, and somebody rolled a grenade in, it would come down the chimney, and that would contain it. That's how that was constructed, that stove. So then the Germans started bending their chimneys down a little bit, but then the English guys would come in with wires and poke a grenade up in there anyway, so they kept them occupied doing stuff like that. Okay, then we went to Vandal, which is down by Billund. Billund is where Soren Flenstedt lives, and he's very active in this particular museum. Billund, for those who are interested, is where Legos started. So Legoland, like Disneyland, is in Billund, Denmark. Now after the war, they decided the best way to get rid of some of these mines was to keep some of the Germans, POWs, that laid them and have them go find them. So they hung on to them for quite a while. And this is what these guys, these Germans, had to go out and find their own mines they'd set. So that was an interesting deal. Now, big cow pasture, right? That's my friend Soren there. You guys really do have to look up his webpage, Everywhere Over Denmark. You have to do that. You will be absolutely amazed. That's my buddy Soren. Looks like I photoshopped it, doesn't it? Look at that big field there. That's where a lot of the fighter planes were kept, near Vandal, in a large area. Again, huge areas that they took over to do this. And they put the planes and run them in there and put nets over the top of them. Now, in some of the grass fields, like they were with Dad there, where he's crashed, it looked like a grass field. So everybody would think that only fighter planes could land there. But they had a concrete thing about 2.5, I don't know if we saw it on there or not, I was too busy running things here, but concrete, honeycomb concrete with holes in it about 4 to 6 inches wide. And this thing was probably 2.5 feet, 3 feet in a circle. And they stuck them all together like Legos out on their field, let the grass grow up between them, so they could actually land bombers on those grass fields. But nobody knew that. Even Soren hadn't seen that before. And when Soren hasn't seen it before, that's pretty cool. Because he's seen everything. Just north of here, up here across, this was all open as well. Keep in mind for you, like POW camps and all these other areas that were overrun by the Germans were all planted into trees a lot right after the war, immediately. Up in here is where they kept the airplanes that were even with the ground, but they had built earthen revetments around them. So when you walk through there, you can see them. So we'll walk through. And here's the guys, Ben Hendrickson, Jim Sorvin, and Soren. Pretty cool guys. They know more about what we did there than we do because they've researched all of it. Pretty cool guys. And that is in the front of their history museum that they had in a command bunker. Oh, Dad's crash site's about 300 yards to the left and back behind the trees. In those days, it was called the History Center Eldringham. Now, Soren says they got water in that bunker, and those bunkers are so heavy that when they start getting water in them, there's almost no way you can get it out of there. So they had to move all their stuff down into the basement of the airport that's there today. It's the Odense Airport. It's like a Bemidji Airport. It's the same size, same building, same runway, all that. So it just gives you an idea. Huge command bunker. They had about 7 different kind of bunkers they made them the same everywhere you went. So whether, no matter what country you're in, the bunker was always built the same. There those things are. See them? They would put them on the field, let the grass grow through it, the bombers could land on them. In that basement was the windshield on Dad's plane. So, as the engineer, and I asked one time, how was it to crash land? He said, oh, just like the other 2 times. Both of those were in England. The engineer had the responsibility of cranking the wheels down halfway so that when they hit, it wouldn't just crash. It would work like a shock absorber, and then he'd pull it back up. And so that's the one that he'd have been looking at while he was doing that. A guy from the Odense newspaper come out, and the very next day, that article was in the paper. For the history of the airport, along with why I was there, and that's all about Dad. Before I went, I told Soren, I said, you know, I want to hire an airplane, a 4-place airplane, and I want to go out and come back in on Dad's last leg to where he crashed and get an idea what he was talking about, what he saw out of the window. Well, so the fellow on the right, Steen, and Soren, and my German nephew I stopped to pick up in Kassel, Germany, and of course the 8th Air Force found the living bejesus out of Kassel. There was hardly anything left of it. So I pick up my nephew in Kassel, take him up here. I said, Sven, you got to jump in with us. No, I don't want to fly. And then he was kidding around. He said, somebody might shoot at us. I said, Sven, you're the only German. Get in a plane. Don't go shoot at us. So away we went. Nice plane. Steen had stood around for an awfully long time waiting for me to get done with everything I was doing so that he could take me. So that's Dad's path coming in to the spot where he actually crashed. And that's about how it went. Get about there, went across the field. Now, and now also in the basement of that temporary place they had for their stuff, where everything was piled in there, they had these crosses of the RAF guys and of our guys. Nearby in February 20th, the guy on Morris was killed. 2 guys were killed in that airplane out in the cow pasture near Odense. And then this other fellow was at some later date. And there's a tag on a parachute they have there of one of the guys who were in that airplane crash 20th of February. So I'm looking at that. Obviously, I'm overtaken by my dad's windshield. But this cross business had really attracted me. From there, we went to Assistance Cemetery in Odense, which is a huge place. Down on the bottom is bent, pointing towards the Americans used to be buried. The rest of those headstones you see are RAF. They're English, New Zealand, Canada. The memorial you see on the right is to all of those guys. And you'll find out why we're not named on there pretty soon. But anyhow, it's a good thing, not a bad thing. On the upper left are 2 guys that died in that cow pasture. I was there a week after they celebrated independence. They heard at 8 o'clock in 1945, at 8 o'clock at night on the 4th, they heard that the next day they would be liberated on the 5th, so that's when they celebrated. That rock is a monument to the 2 guys who died in that cow pasture. Now you'll notice something. See the flowers around the bottom of it? Great reverence for our folks. Amazing. And now here's what happened to our guys. See all the coffins on the upper left-hand side? Those are our guys. In 1946, we asked the Danes who had gone out into the fields, into the crash sites after the Germans quit burying our guys, and they took them all to little churchyards and sacred and safe places and buried them and put either a wooden cross by them or a stone, and they kept them. We went in 46 and asked, will you bring all those guys in to us? And they did, except for half a dozen. They were all brought in. And they were ID'd and taken care of, as you see, in the pine boxes with the flags on top. Now, on the bottom picture, they took one of the bodies out, and they put flowers around it, and they had a bishop come, and they had a great affair. And then they put that casket in that hearse, that horse-drawn hearse, and they took it down to the railroad station. And they put it in the first car of the railroad, of the train, which is filled with birch leaves. It's a Nordic custom to use birch leaves on something like this. They placed that first coffin in there. That night they came through and they put all the rest of the bodies in there. This is the chapel where they were, and the lean-to down on the bottom to the right there. That's where all those bodies were. Now, I came here that day. It's parched hard, folks, so hang in there with me. I came in there that day. I'm going to get you out. And Ben and Jens pointed out that they had an American flag flying for me that day. An American coffin flag. And they were so gracious and so wonderful. They showed me everything. They took me everywhere. We talked, and they were just so great. And Mary of Cook and Home. As I was prepared to leave the area, Ben and Jens come to me, each of them with this flag. And they said, David, this coffin flag was one of those flags that were on those coffins from 1946 until they were taken away in 1948. On the 8th of May of 1948, that train pulled out, and it took all those bodies up to Belgium where they were reburied, except for the ones, the families who came and got them. They're still buried there. But what got me really big time was the two of them, while I was in doing some other things, came to me with his flag folded up, with both their hands on it, and said, David, the men who were in under this flag never got home. I want you to take their souls home with this flag. I'm talking 8th Air Force, guys. Every one of those coffins you saw was 8th Air Force, and they were all flyers. Every one. That's why you got to go to Airwar, Denmark, and check it out. And this is special. A special, special flag. Now, if anybody would like to touch it or see more of it, please help yourself. Kind of tough getting through that one. I did not know what to say to those guys when they handed it to me. I was speechless. And I'm English, that's pretty hard to be speechless. But I was. On May 5th every year they celebrate. They celebrate everything. And on the way home I said to myself, I saw all those flowers, and I saw all those monuments, and I saw all this stuff and all this research. So what am I going to do to say thanks? I got home and I said to Jim Trilla, I said, you know, Jim, I've been thinking about it. I showed him the flag and told him the story. I said, do you think we could take your balloon over there and thank them for how well they took care of all our guys? And he said, yes. So that's what we did. We took it right there. They had a temporary museum set up in an old farmhouse there that had some of the stuff in it, like my dad's windshield and a door off of the plane that crashed in February that the guys couldn't get open, and finally some guy just simply took a run at it and knocked it out. But you could see where they'd been kicking it and scratching it, trying to get out of that airplane. And that parachute you saw was one of the guys that was in there. So we went, and on the 4th, we went a week earlier than the last time. So this past year, we were there for their celebration. Now, see the flags. These are still our Danish friends taking care of us. This is a memorial to the Allies and all the casualties of World War II. Look at the flags. It's amazing. And they put up, there's an old partisan guy. There's Jim Trilla in the upper left with his VFW National Surgeon hat on. There is a tribute to all of the victims of World War II. Now the way we made it work is, we sent the balloon over, and his friends, Jim's balloon friends, who also fly balloons in Belgium, drove all the way over there. They will do anything for POWs. And they drove all the way there. That's about a 6-7 hour drive, I suppose, from Brussels over to this place, with their van, with their basket, with everything in it. And showed up here. We couldn't let the balloon go because it was too windy, but we worked all day putting it up and down and doing things. And it was really something. There were at least 50 cars from the car club showed up that day. Because we brought the balloon over, they had an air show. Jens had an air show that day. The Danish Air Force couldn't fly over, it was against the rules. So they just simply changed their training route that day and flew over anyway. We had we had helicopters, we had people jumping out of airplanes, we had skydivers, Jens. And they did it because we brought the balloon over. They thought, let's make a big day out of this. They didn't know how well it would go over. By the end of the day, when they counted out their meals they'd sold out of their little cafeteria, they had $4,000 worth of meals sold that day. A lot of people showed up. And they had reenactors. And everybody came, and it was quite a day. Now, I'm blessed with lots of friends that are really dear to me, but no one's more dear to me after having been there than these three right here. Bent and Jens have been working on the history forever. Back here on the table, there's those coffin pictures are out of the book he wrote in '95. Jens is just making that thing work, and Ann Emmons was the partisan museum person who lost her area down in Odense. They didn't have any money to work with. So he just simply lost their area down in Odense. So they all come out here to the airport and made a little temporary museum in the farm building that was there left over prior to the war. Now let me tell you what else happened. Remember, our whole mission was to thank them. So we did. There was a guy there with a gun collection, or over there they have a gun at all. You know, don't ever let them take your gun. You can't even have knives over there. But if you have a gun collection, they have to be disabled, and they have to be very rigorous about everything. There's a big burly guy, like you'd see at one of our would show. He was kind of in charge. His brother there and his kid there. Towards the end of the day, I walked over to him and I said, you know, I said, I have to thank you personally for all that your folks did for our people during World War II. By taking care of the casualties, making sure they were buried, making sure everything. And he began to cry. And he saw this huge big man walk away sobbing when I said thank you. I went to a guy who rode in on a German motorcycle with a sidecar and all dressed up in the park. And I said, where'd you get that motorcycle? He said, oh, I got it in England and America and parts from all over the world. I went up and I said, thanks. I'm here to thank you today. It's the only reason we're here is to say thank you for how well you took care of our casualties. And he began to cry and walked away. They have a problem because they didn't fight back in World War II, but they did everything they possibly could to help us. And I have no doubt about that. Everything they could do, they did. And if it wasn't for them, half those guys you see in those coffins would have never been there because the crows that had them. Guaranteed. And if you go on that everywhere over Denmark, you get a sense of that. 2 days after I got back, or no, about a week after I got back, I got an email from Ann. She said to me, she said, David, 2 days after you left, 40 prominent businessmen and politicians come to see what it was we were doing and what we needed. And in October, we opened a new museum. Mission accomplished. Mission accomplished. Amazing, just amazing. And they work at it all the time. If ever, and it's it's a lot about the English. It's an awful lot about the 8th Air Force, I can tell you. You may be at the last, there it is. There's the last slide. Dad's crash site is just on the other side of these trees. Oop, I'm going to stop right there. Your dad's crash site's on the other side of those. Oh, that didn't work. Okay. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to go back and see if I can capture that last one again. Oh, okay. Not going to work. There. I want to run through it quickly. I'm sure we're getting short of time. Anybody else go to Florida for training for flight engineering or know anybody that did that? The reason I would like to show you that last slide is I didn't do it quick enough. That's kind of what started all this. It looks like Dad got a bunch of letters, but he didn't get a lot of letters. But he had gotten some by November. He'd been in a prison camp since May. And that last slide is the background you see here. It's a letter he sent to his brother saying, I have heard from Brenda, and I know about the baby. That baby. So anyway, that's my story on that. I have several other stories that would be interesting to you as 8th Air Force guys because of England, being born there and have family there, that I know you'd be interested in. So maybe sometime in the future we can put some of that together and show it to you.
How many people on your dad's crew survived the crash?
They all survived. The navigator or bombardier jumped up a little too quick and cut the end of his finger off. And other than that, nobody got hurt. Dad had come back so many times with the airplanes just tore up that it was real hard for him to believe that they didn't make it with just one bullet hole in it.
What was the name of the plane?
Gamecock. Yeah. Oh. Game Talk 527 Squadron. When you go on your 34th mission, for the first time ever, you're put in a different squadron. That's not a good luck thing. This is Soren's webpage right here. If you go on there, honest to God, if you go on there and see what's in that, you will not believe it.
Those American dead that had the flags on there, do you have any identification on where those were from? Or?
Well, there is identification on a lot of that stuff. I don't happen to have it, but it does say on that stuff where they made the monument there and so on, that all that information is on that monument, and that is carved in there a half-inch deep. It's really amazing. It's just really amazing. But that's the flag, guys. That made on one of the...
One other thing, your dad was in that prison camp that was in Poland. Did he get involved in the Fort March afterwards?
Yeah, he went almost 600 miles down to Bitterfeld, just north of Halle. When they got there on the 26th of April, 104th Infantry liberated them. The guys weighed from 80 to 115 pounds, and that's how they were. They didn't have much time left, actually. It was just under 600 miles. Now, not everybody went the same direction. Some went to Polyvostal, some went down. Dad's was one of the longest ones. I think there might have been one longer than that. But they were in pretty tough shape by the time they got down there. What happened is the night before, Mulder, they crossed the Mulder River. And the Mulder River is just west of the Elk River, little ways. In fact, the 104th Infantry came by that day. When I crossed the Mulder, the next day hooked up to the Russians at the Elk. So that's how close the Russians were to Dad's group. Now, there was 10,000 guys or so that marched out of that camp, but they broke them into groups of about 300 or so because there was, logistically, you couldn't handle a big crowd like that. And haven't survived at all. So it was broken down quite a bit. And they had it tough. They had it very tough. One guy that was with him, the radio operator that was in 326, come up to me at a reunion one day. He says, "You know, your dad's kind of ornery." I said, "Yeah, I know all about that." He said, "But he saved my life several times on that march." I said, "Wow."
Is there anyone left on his crew, or?
No, not that I know of, no. No. I'm going to capture that last one somehow here. But this big cemetery is where they had all those flags and everything going on. It's just amazing, really, when you see it. I'm just going to let it run through, guys. Any other questions at all?
Did he discuss this with you after the service, after his?
Later on. I did intel work for over 3 years in Germany, and all I knew about Dad is that he was in a prison camp in Germany. Well, he wasn't. He was in Poland. I had privy, because of my job, to see all the paperwork on all the POW camps. I had no idea where he was. And I could have probably got some of the confidential stuff declassified out of there, but, you know. Now, if I miss it, we'll just have to go without it. Bent on the left, he doesn't talk. He just grins. He ain't got much to say. Jens talks all the time, so they make a pretty good pair. I'm going to see if that works. Yeah.
Let's give him a hand.
So there you are. If you have any questions, please look up. If there's any opportunity to donate anything to those folks doing that museum, it'd be really, they'd never ask for it, I can tell you that. But if they were able to get something, they would certainly appreciate it. And the work they put into it, and the way they took care of our 8th Air Force guys is beyond compare. So, that's it, folks.
Okay, one more time.
We can use close-ups, because right now, for the South Pacific story of B-24s and the takeout of Yamaguchi, it's just little tiny models.
Yeah.
But if you can hold them up and then close-ups of them, maps that show the route into Russia, the route into Yugoslavia, close up. And then get them up on a much bigger screen, much more effective.
Yeah, well, there is an enormous screen that can pull down, but the question would be, who's got a projector? You know, there are projectors that would do that, but I don't think they have anything here that would be available unless you rented it or something.
I'll look into that.
Yeah.
I gotta wire something. Figure out how to wire the presentations. When they're giving these people, really they can grasp everything.